Recently, Final Smash has temporarily breached the competitive sphere through Hungrybox's use of the Smash meter in one of his tournaments. I was kind of hoping that this would actually stick around, but I guess people sort of realized why Final Smashes weren't allowed beforehand. But basically, being the guy who talks about worthless nonsense, there's a lot that I've learned or continue to learn about Final Smashes in general, and what better time to compile some of these fun facts and tips than now? Who knows, maybe it'll come in handy in an alternate universe.
We have much to learn!
And a lot of these are still useless even from the perspective of Smash meter tournaments, but who cares? Though I will start with something a little bit practical. Normally when you hit an opponent, that'll fill your Smash meter by a little bit, and their Smash meter by considerably more. Sort of helps act as a bit of a comeback mechanic. However, here you'll clearly notice that I'm gaining a little bit of meter per hit, but the Ice Climbers aren't getting any, outside of the usual passive growth. This is because the secondary Ice Climber is just a wannabe baby and isn't real or cool, so it won't affect the meter of the real Ice Climber. However, Shulk, or anyone doing the attacking here, doesn't really discriminate. This is kind of funny on its own, and alongside the other things I go over today, I covered that on an ancient video a long time ago. But there's an interesting question that I never really looked into. Popo, the primary, works as any character would in this regard, giving a little bit of meter when hit, but receiving more. However, Nana, the secondary, only gives meter, does not receive. So how does this compare to hitting a normal character? Does Nana's effect stack onto Popo's, or does Popo just sort of take priority? I just did a pretty basic test of seeing how many forward smashes from Shulk it would take to have him get his final smash, and when attacking the Ice Climbers, both at the same time, it took 14 forward smashes total. However, when attacking Mario in the same way, it took 26 forward smashes, basically double. So yeah, this isn't just a funny little quirk, this straight up nerfs the Ice Climbers in any environment where the smash meter is on. I mean, it's pretty often that attacks will hit both characters, right? This means it could be a viable option to try and isolate the secondary Ice Climber and just rack up some free damage even more. It's not like she can fight back. Now you might try and justify this by saying, oh, well PK, the Ice Climbers technically have 2 attackers, so maybe because the attacks double up, things sort of balance out like that? Well, let's try. Same test, just this time it's the Ice Climbers doing the forward smashes, and no, I don't even have to be thorough here. Look down at Shulk's meter. It has 2 sudden jolts, corresponding to the 2 hammer attacks. Now let's look at the Ice Climbers. Barely even a budge, and that budge only happens once. So if we make another chart, this time for meter when doing the attacking, we get something like this. And when we again combine the secondary Ice Climber into the primary, their total meter when attacking is oriented like this. Even more unbalanced than last time. And now combining that with the results from getting hit for some kind of hypothetical overall meter gained and received chart, we see this. A normal character has things relatively balanced out, whereas the Ice Climbers are completely lopsided now thanks to the secondary Ice Climber, who can basically only give the opponent meter. Given how the spread isn't even between attacking and being attacked, and how complex matches can actually turn out, it's not like the difference will be mathematically consistent, but given these ideas, the Ice Climbers will absolutely be at a meter deficit compared to their opponent, even if only slightly. Now, just for funsies, while I was out going to dinner with my family, I put on a match with 2 level 9 CPUs, one being Cloud, cause, I don't know, larger meteor hitboxes, and one being the Ice Climbers. I just had them duke it out for the duration of my trip, and once I got back I checked the stats to see how many final smashes were even used, and after about 2 hours I came back and the stats were surprisingly underwhelming. 85 final smashes out of Cloud and 80 out of the Ice Climbers. Not really a huge difference. And for comparison, Cloud did have a decent amount more KOs and less deaths than the Ice Climbers, but not too much? Now this is still some evidence based on the fact that Cloud was in the lead, yet was also in the lead for final smashes, whereas normally the one getting beat up more should have more final smash opportunities. Like I said, it's a comeback mechanic. But I still decided to do one more test. Cause see, Ice Climbers can use their final smash anywhere and have it be about as effective as normal, whereas cutscene final smashes like Cloud's need to be sorta positioned before use. I figured this discrepancy could affect the amount of time the AI held onto the final smash for, which would affect the overall use, so I swapped Cloud out for Bowser, someone who can also use their final smash whenever. I waited another 2 hours, and this time it's a bit more obvious. Bowser used 102 Final Smashes compared to Ice Climber's 81. A difference of 21 is fairly substantial, especially when Bowser had such a massive lead in points and KOs, meaning Ice Climbers should have been getting way more Final Smash opportunities themselves. So no, it's not like it's twice as often, but it's definitely more often. I also found it interesting looking at damage given and taken. You can see that the Ice Climber's damage taken is about 14,000, but Bowser's damage given is well over 25,000. This would imply that there is an extra 11,000% worth of extra smash meter that's coming from the secondary Ice Climber, which is kinda cool to know. And before I move on from this, you're probably wondering about Rosalina and Luma, and hitting Luma doesn't give anyone any meter, and while Luma hitting someone alongside Rosalina hitting someone both give their own meter, the same is true for the meter that's received. So it still balances out, you know? There's no weird discrepancy. So yeah, you might want to drop the Ice Climbers a bit on the competitive Smash meter tier list that doesn't exist. Should I make a tier list of Final Smashes? Does anyone even care? I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments, I guess. That's my mandatory call to action, that's how you know I'm professional. Alright, we stuck with that one for a bit, so let's blitz through some others. If you use a Final Smash while in the air, once it's done, regardless of whether or not it was successful, you will get a little bounce. If you keep this in mind, this little bounce may be able to give you enough extra height to recover when you otherwise couldn't. Remember, pop it, don't drop it. This one's less useful in 1v1 but still worth noting, but if someone lands a cutscene Final Smash, you know, not on you, any negative effect you were experiencing beforehand gets removed. Most notable would be Freefall, as once the cutscene is over, you'll actually regain control of your character, which can be super helpful, as long as you remember. And this also includes things like having your shield broken, or being asleep. Of course, this only comes into play when the Final Smash lands, but also only for cutscene Final Smashes that change the scene. So obviously this doesn't happen for non-cutscene Final Smashes, but also not for ones that still keep everyone on stage and loaded, I guess. Also, it's worth keeping in mind that, while most moves don't really deal knockback or function normally against a frozen opponent, most Final Smashes will unfreeze them on hit in order to work properly. This was the case for any of the cutscene Final Smashes or something similar that I tested, though it's not all Final Smashes in general. The most interesting test came from Link's. Upon successful hit, the opponent will be unfrozen and will take all of the reduced damage from being hit in the ice. However, they'll receive 0 knockback. This is contrary to one like, say, Dark Pit, who just doesn't break the ice at all. So Link's just kinda weird, though I guess we've kinda known that one for a while with that one fact with the pitfall, huh? I won't go over that here, you can watch my entire supercut from past content to find it somewhere. Yes, you have to watch the entire thing. Also, kind of funny to mention that the timer for being frozen still goes on in real time even while these slowdown cutscenes happen. So while Mario would normally stay frozen until after he landed on the ground, when using Link's Final Smash, Mario will get unfrozen in the air instead. Okay, yada yada, next. If Pikachu or Pichu use their Final Smash on an opponent with Invincibility, the Final Smash will resort to a shorter version where it just goes straight to the finisher. This happens for any form of invincibility, meaning if your character can pull that out like with the start of Lucas's up smash, you can kinda block the Final Smash. It's still not as good as like dodging, but it sends a message. It's strange for them to have this kind of, what I imagine is a failsafe, given how any character with a similar kind of Final Smash just ignores invincible opponents, which is just straight up better since it means someone who's invincible won't body block your attack, and you can still succeed by hitting someone behind. Also, Bayonetta's Witch Time counter is actually effective against Final Smashes somehow. The slowdown won't be applied to the opponent or anything, but it'll effectively let her dodge. This is contrary to most counters, which will just get ignored by the Final Smash. Sora's is weird, I guess for the first few frames it has special intangibility that lets him avoid the attack, but in later frames of the counter, again it just gets ignored. And no, Bayonetta's Witch Time does not apply the reflective properties that make the attack her own, so the Final Smash will not hit the user's teammate if it passes through her like a normal projectile would. Next, Wonder Wing is normally a form of invincibility that would ignore anything in the game except for grabs or grab adjacent moves. However, some Final Smashes do end up ignoring Wonder Wing. This would imply that these attacks are grabs, or again, grab adjacent. So how do they interact with the grab invincibility that characters undergo after being grabbed once? For Incineroar's Final Smash, there's a very clear pause and denial here. His Final Smash wants to interact, but is directly not allowed to. This is very different from how he interacts with an invincible character, which he usually just ignores and goes right through, so that's very good confirmation there. However, the other Final Smashes that ignored Wonder Wing that I tested did not stop working on a character with grab invincibility, so clearly there's a few more nuances to the mechanics than just that. Still on Wonder Wing, for some reason Dark Pit's Final Smash will ignore the move and deal knockback. However, it won't deal any damage still, and this knockback is not set. It does scale on some factor, but a factor different from the normal Final Smash. As we can see here, it's not KOing around this position past 70%. But with fixed damage turned on and hitting the Final Smash normally, it's easily KOing. So somehow the knockback is decreased by a considerable margin. No, this does not happen with Link, his Final Smash gets properly ignored. Next, Lucas and Ness's PK Starstorms differ in surprisingly significant ways. Lucas's stars are weaker and generally smaller than Ness's, but he makes up for it by being able to cast them anywhere, which is directly tied to his position, whereas Ness always defaults to the center of the stage. This makes Lucas's PK Starstorm far more versatile than Ness's, and in some extreme cases, Lucas can even have the stars go upwards, and at all other kinds of crazy angles. I'm not sure how that would ever be useful, but even on a competitive stage, Lucas could completely shut down the offstage area where his opponent is at, whereas Ness has to just start at the center and slowly make his way over, kinda. It's a pretty cool nuance that I imagine a lot of people just didn't even pick up on. Also, fun fact, if you use Ridley's Final Smash and then immediately use Zero Suit Samus's, there will technically be two gunships in the background at the same time. Also, if you didn't know, any buffs to your character will affect your Final Smash too. So for characters like, say, Shulk or Hero, that can lead to an even more powerful attack with relatively low cost. Just as a good tip. And speaking of tips, as I've said a trillion times by now, you can cancel Martha or Lucina's Final Smashes by tapping B again, or whatever your special input is. Which could save you from accidentally SDing, which would be super embarrassing and really awkward for you to do. Next, whenever you use Olimar's Final Smash on Frigate Orpheon, you'll clearly see the other half of the stage sitting right at the top as normal, completely intangible and normally out of sight. Obviously, this is the side that the stage will flip you to whenever it comes to time. You can't really stick an item on this side and have it flip, then see it from Olimar's Final Smash, because items don't stick when the stage flips. Though, fun fact, if you use a Final Smash during the flip period, it'll be incredibly slowed down and let you play around with the stages as they get into position, which is kinda funny. For something brand new to the channel, SNG77 on my Discord, invite link below if you want to submit your own facts, shared a prompt regarding Pac-Man's Final Smash. That being, if you use a move like Charizard's Fire Breath while facing Pac-Man's Final Smash, it'll actually halt the process of the attack for a decent amount of time. I haven't been able to get it to stay like this though, but I kept at it for a while. This won't really happen that well with the Super Spicy Curry since the projectiles are just, I guess, slower, but it can happen with Bowser's neutral special as well. I guess the Final Smash eats anything, even projectiles, so the Fire Breaths count as such, and Pac-Man just keeps chomping away. This isn't really a viable counter to the Final Smash because of how ludicrously inconsistent it is. Like, even after all of my testing, I wasn't able to halt the Final Smash for more than a handful of seconds, and most of the time it just doesn't work. That's because the Fire Breaths don't come out every single individual frame, and it just leaves little gaps for the Final Smash to break through. But, you know, it's still pretty funny, and I'm sure there's a perfect setup to get it to last even longer. And if this setup did exist, it could potentially softlock, or at least heavily delay the Final Smash ending, as the hit lag from Pac-Man chomping something does affect the amount of time he stays out proportionally, which is a super funny thought. Also, while I'm talking about Pac-Man, I might as well drop in the fact about how that one victory screen with the retro sprite gets broken if you use Pac-Man's Final Smash anywhere at all at any point in the match, causing the retro sprite to just disappear for some reason. Still kinda crazy to me that they didn't fix this. I mentioned this, like 2019 or something? Okay, so we've talked about a lot here, so let's end off this video with an awesome fact by Final Mix regarding Peach and Daisy's Final Smash. And it's actually super simple. Just equip the Instant Drop Spirit, whose effect makes you fall super quickly and deal damage while falling and landing, and then have Peach use her Final Smash. And now, while the Instant Drop effect is still present, the hitbox is just gone. Like, straight up. It comes back when you lose your stock, but otherwise it heavily nerfs this effect. And yes, this is a universal thing, not just a Peach immunity. The hitbox is entirely removed. This happens even if Mario isn't directly hit by Peach's Final Smash. I was able to avoid being put to sleep over here, yet the hitbox was still removed. This means it has nothing to do with Mario being put to sleep, which does kinda limit the scope of this glitch, but it means it's definitely something weird with the Final Smash specifically. Though if Mario gets KO'd right after Peach starts the Final Smash, the spirit won't be glitched out, and the same is true if I'm still respawning during that initial period, so I guess you still need to be in existence. But as long as you're somewhere while the Final Smash gets used, the game just forgets how this one spirit works. And yes, this does work for Daisy under the same logic. However, it doesn't remove the effect of the Impact Run spirit. The only spirit that comes even remotely close to the Insta-Drop one in terms of mechanics. I really can't think of a reason why there would be this discrepancy, and frankly, I can't think of a reason why this glitch even happens in the first place. It's just such a weird niche bug. I tested out a few other spirit effects like item grab or triple jump or whatever, and I tested a few other Final Smashes, you know, with the Insta-Drop, and I could not replicate this. So it's just a super stupid side effect of these Final Smashes that you can say you know about now, and feel super duper smart. But I think I've been spoiling you with Final Smash nonsense, so I'm going to end the video there and hope everyone can band together and develop the meta even further. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's more topic-focused video. For those of you who've seen my whole catalog of random facts, you may recognize a lot of the content in today's video. Like, this comes from the first, I guess, 10 episodes of this series from like 5 years ago. That's deliberate. I've been going through a lot of my old content recently and writing things down with the intent of revisiting topics with a new light. That came through the most with the Ice Climber stuff that today's thumbnail and title was based around, as when I touched on it in the original video I only barely mentioned it for like a few seconds, and didn't even think to go into more detail or test other things. So I'm really glad I decided to take another look at it and actually learn more. I thought it was super interesting. And sure, there were several facts that I just sort of left as is, but I also figured that a lot of people who are watching my channel now weren't exactly around way back then, and even if they were, they've probably forgotten a lot about my old content by now, in which case a refresher never hurts. Even as the dude who made these videos, I found myself surprised at how many of these facts I've been relearning by watching through them again. So let me know what you think about this kind of format again. Obviously, it won't overshadow my typical random facts videos where all the content is brand new for the channel, but I think it could be a fun opportunity to, I guess, remaster a lot of old information and let myself be a bit more thorough with the topics I didn't touch up on enough in the past. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'd like to thank my fabulous patrons, Raighne, Soul700, Wescott Reed, Burbo, and everyone else for their support. Stay casual, and I'll see y'all later.